I'm Danny, and this is the Scream Princess podcast. Hello there, everybody. I'm Danny, and you are watching or listening to the Scream Princess podcast. And I'm joined today by the lovely Pat Higgins. How are you doing, Pat?
I'm doing great, thanks, Danny, and it's lovely to be here.
Oh, it's lovely to have you here. How have you recovered from horror on sea?
Yeah, I mean, every year there's always that kind of big build up, and you're like, oh, and you look forward to stuff, and you try and plan what movies you'll make it to, and all that, and then it's this whole blur of activity, and then you kind of decompress, and then you kind of go, oh, it's over. That's weird. It takes me a while to acclimatize to the fact that, oh yeah, that's just kind of done for another year now. So yeah, it's
Mm.
always one of the highlights of the calendar. Love me some horror on sea.
Real life has to kind of continue afterwards.
Yeah.
So
So what about yourself? Did you have a good one this year?
I did. I only made one of the weekends this year because I'm far away now. So for to do two weekends, it's like it's too far to travel back and forth like in 2 weeks. And
Yeah.
obviously staying down, that's a big chunk of time. Like it's like 10 days if I stay for the whole thing. But it was good, but I'm hoping to come back south for Romford. So I don't know. I think this may go out just before Romford, this podcast. So it'll still be relevant. But Pat has been around in the industry for a very long time. And I would say, like, although you do different things, so you teach film, you write, you produce, you direct, you do all kinds of different things. But I would say you're predominantly horror.
Yeah. I never really intended it to necessarily be that way, but the genre's been really good to me, and so I've kind of stuck with it. I mean, prior to my first movie, I used to write stuff that was a lot more genre neutral, shall we say? That was, I'd try a little bit of this, a little bit of that, some stuff that were kind of dark comedic thrillers and things like that. But generally, I think since Trash House back in which I shot 2004, so it's 21 years ago now. Since then, I've pretty much gone, yeah, actually, horror's been good to me. So I've kind of
Yeah.
stayed in that zone.
I'm the same. I didn't set out just to do horror, but here I am.
Well,
Years later.
it suits us. I think the genre suits us.
It does. It does. So I've got a little list here of your some of your productions. I
Oh, fantastic.
popped onto IMDb, and I know like people always say that to me, and actually half the stuff on my IMDb I'm not in, but I think for you because you're sort of on the producing, directing, writing side, your credits probably are actual credits that have happened. I'm hoping.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've got loads that are just like, yeah, that film never happened. I was attached to that, that never happened. So Trash House, that was your first foray into writing, producing, directing. Did you do all of them?
Yeah. Yeah, that one, and I thought it might be my only shot at it. I was lucky enough, blessed enough to do it when it was really, really hard to make movies. And I think that's the only reason that I've been able to keep a career going for 20 years, because now people are cursed with the fact that it's really dead easy. You could theoretically shoot something on the phone in your pocket and then launch it yourself and self-distribute and say this is a feature. But at the time we made Trash House, you couldn't do that. Digital filmmaking was only just edging through. There were like 16 British horror movies made that year, of which ours was one. And so the making it was really the hard bit. And from that point on, there was a novelty value attached to it. It's like, oh, made a horror movie,
Mm.
and so distributors, whether they picked it up or not, they all wanted to watch it. Um, and then when it came out, we got a wide DVD release. It was in sort of every blockbuster in the country and all that sort of thing. And I think that was purely because it was really tough to make movies at that point, and that was the
Mm.
best gift we ever had. I think if in the marketplace as it is at the moment, there's no way we could have got anybody to pay any attention to it whatsoever. You've got incredibly gifted individuals making really interesting, varied, cool stuff, and the market's just full. It's not just full of bad stuff. The market's full of brilliant stuff, inspired stuff, some really poor stuff, but it's all kind of jumbled in together. And the poor old customer has to kind of pick through it. So I preferred making it when it was harder to make the movie and easier to get people to care.
That's mad. I think we said 16 horror UK horror films were made that year. Like
Yeah,
16. Now it's like 16 a month, a week. I mean, that's
yeah,
ones
yeah.
that, we probably know about 16 people who are at the moment in the process of making a film.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
that's,
Yeah, yeah.
there's lots of people we don't know that are out there making films. And like you said, probably maybe some of them on their phones, maybe them, all different kind of levels of filmmaking. But it is so accessible to so many people now,
Yeah.
which in one way it's good because it gives people
Mm,
that wouldn't necessarily have a chance or the means to make a film to have a go. But there's also that, when I go onto Netflix or Prime now and I want to watch something, I sit and I scroll for
yeah,
so long trying to find something that I want to watch. And I'll just be like, no, 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 because
yeah.
there's so much. And you know what? I might be missing some really, really good ones.
Totally.
I'm kind of looking at the cover art first, which I know is not, it's not what I should be looking at to I shouldn't judge the book by the cover or the film by the cover. But you go through all of these things and I'll end up reading a book. I'll be like, I give up.
Yeah.
I'm going to read a book. But
I mean, I think one of the things I liked about the marketplace where the tough bit was making it rather than getting people to watch it
mm,
was that people could take a few more risks. Because, I mean, if someone watched Trash House, they'd have to drive to Blockbuster, decide that's the movie for me, rent it, drive home, and
mhm.
then put it on. And so then by the time they go, Christ, this is cheaper than I thought it was going to be, but
But
they're
they can book
still going to
it.
give it a go. Whereas if someone clicks on it because they've invested their
Mm.
time, they've invested their money, they've got to drive the thing back to the video shop again tomorrow. Whereas now, if they turn it on, they go, that looks cheap, and then they're gone. I think that makes indie filmmakers really risk averse as well, because
Yeah.
they've got to make sure that they're hooking people in the first minute and a half,
Hmm.
maybe. And you don't get the luxury to sort of set up your stall and set up your characters, because people will
Yeah.
just be on to the next thing and you'll just stream a whole bunch of 5 seconds.
Especially with the lower budget independents, because obviously if you've got a higher budget and you've got kind of these big known actors, people, they've got a big fan
Yeah,
base, people will still watch, they'll commit, they'll be like, okay, the first few minutes weren't great. I'll stick with it because I know that person's in it. But when you're working with kind of a cast of some unknowns, that's when they're definitely going to switch off.
yeah, 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 absolutely. So yeah, I'm glad people get their shot at making things. I don't want to sound like I'm entirely dismissive around it being, because there are so many wonderful, incredible creative voices who otherwise wouldn't get access to that
Hmm.
platform. But I think it kind of sucks that there are people making these amazing movies and then they're not getting eyeballs on them. I think there's
Yeah.
something almost sadder about that than not making. I don't know.
Yeah, because there are very talented people that, still don't get a look in.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
So after Trash House, Killer Killer.
Yeah, well, actually,
No?
Killer Killer came out second,
Ah,
but it was actually shot third. We shot Hellbride and Killer Killer back to back one summer,
right.
and so Hellbride was actually my second movie, but because it had loads more in terms of post production, we had ghost effects, we had all that sort of thing, and it took a bit longer to find a distributor for it as well. So we shot the two of them back to back over 2006, which was just so the whole summer was just boom, 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 and we shot these two movies back to back. And then yeah, so Hellbride was shot first, but came out third, and Killer Killer we shot. So we shot in July or August, and it had a premiere at a festival in like October. I mean, it just had this insanely
Oh,
fast turnaround on it. But that was a hell of a summer to do the two of
yeah,
them back.
two films, one summer.
Oh my god, yeah, I remember. I
Was this
remember
before you
that.
had kids? Because you wouldn't be able to get away with that now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we burnt the candle at both ends. We were absolutely fried. And I remember the one evening we were not working on some element of one or the other of the movies was the night Superman Returns came out. And I work with my wife Pippa, and she's produced a whole bunch of my movies and stuff like that. And so we've both been working ourselves stupid, and we were like, no, we're going to take the evening and we're going to watch Superman Returns. And so we went out to the cinema, and we were both asleep by the end of the opening credits.
Oh no,
We were just out, and then we just woke up going, well, that was an expensive nap.
it's cheaper than a hotel though.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Probably not so comfortable. There's nothing worse. I hate falling asleep in the cinema because it's not that I don't want to watch a film, but I really struggle. I struggle with being awake late, and I
Right.
struggle with watching a film in the dark.
Yeah.
And if I'm comfortable, I'll fall asleep. Like I went out with some friends last night just for dinner and a couple of drinks, came home. I was in bed by 11, but I woken up today and everything so far has gone wrong. It's like I need to be in bed by 7 now. Like I woke up, I booked tickets to go and see the Pamela Anderson film on
Oh
Monday.
yeah, that looks good.
Yeah, but I booked tickets for Surrey instead of Sunderland. So then I realized my mistake and I've gotten a refund and I've booked the tickets for Sunderland. And then I recorded an episode of my vegan vamp cooking show.
Hmm.
And then I realized when I thought I've pressed play, I'd actually pressed stop. And then I'd have kind of done the opposite for about five of the different
Oh
bits of it. So all
no.
I've
So
got
you
is
just
videos of
recorded the
me
bit.
just in the kitchen, like walking around doing things. So I'm kind of I'm gonna do the podcast and I'm gonna go and redo the second half. So I'm now gonna have a double amount of peas pudding.
Yeah, that's no bad thing, but that is brutal. I've experienced that thing before where you listen to it back and it's like, is everybody ready? Yep, I'm just going to press record now, and then it turns off, and oh,
Yeah,
it's just heartbreaking.
yeah. Yeah, I realized it during the edits. I thought I had all of my scenes, and then I was editing, and I was like, "Oh, well, that's fun." So yeah, I need early nights. I'm usually in bed by like 7, 8 o'clock now. I'll be like, I'm going to bed with a cup of tea and a book and until I fall asleep. It's great.
That's very, very sophisticated. I think that's the way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. The other busy summer, and then after that, the Devil's Music.
So we did the two back to back, and then we shot Devil's Music with what was left in the budget. We'd managed to get some investment off the back of the fact that Trash House got widely distributed. We got a little block of investment, and we had, I think, literally £1.5 grand left. That was our
Mm,
contingency, for the back to back
mm,
shoot. And Pip and I looked at each other and said, I reckon we could shoot like a fake documentary for that. So we did so we thought, okay, if we lean into it and we do a load of talking heads interviews and
mm.
then we spend the rest of the money really wisely to try and get the most production value for the bits that aren't like that. And it ended up being, I think, what most people consider my best film of that decade, and it was literally just shot with the leftover money in the thing and shot kind of a little bit on the fly. It was like invited, because there were loads of talking heads interviews, it was like you'd meet someone and go, actually, do you want to pop around and just be a character for sort of 10 minutes? So
Yeah.
there's a really wild guest list, cast list rather. But I was really proud of it, and it won Festival of Fantastic Films. It won Best Independent Feature that year. Kim Newman was very nice about it, and again, it was just this little that was meant to be our little kind of blowing off steam thing, and it ended up being something we're really proud of.
I love that. Like most people would be like, right, we've done 2 films. Let's go on holiday or let's do this. And you're like, I
Oh
know. Let's let's do another film. Let's wear ourselves out a little bit more. But that's what you have to do.
yeah, and I'm glad, again. I'm glad we did, because that was still at the time where digital hadn't really got much of a foothold, or at least people hadn't
Mm,
realized how accessible it was. So it was before that you got that kind of tidal wave of competition
mm.
that happened. By the time you get to 2010,
Yeah,
there is an awful lot of digitally shot independent horror that you would be shouting for attention. But by
yeah.
that point, I'd already got 4 features and an anthology movie under my belt. And
Mm,
so I was starting to get approached to do sort of script rewrites and stuff like that. So I was just lucky enough that I was able to shout loud enough before all the other voices joined, I
mm.
guess.
Out of all of the things, out of the writing, out of the directing, out of the producing, do you have a favorite or do you feel like you're always going to be doing all of it?
The awful truth is that I pine for whatever I'm not doing.
Right.
So if I'm writing, I'm sitting there going, "Oh, I wish I was on set." If I'm on set, I'm sitting there going, "It'd be great to be post producing, to be able to actually be putting these shots together and getting a sense of how the movie is." And then as soon as I'm post producing, I want to be writing another script. So I think that it's tragic. I need some more mindfulness in my life. I need a bit more, awareness of what do you call it, living in the moment kind of thing,
Yeah.
so that I can actually go, I am on set and I am enjoying it, rather than being, I can't wait till I'm editing this, uh, or watching somebody else edit it and seeing the thing come together.
Yeah, I
So
think like once sometimes you're on set, it can be so busy, you kind of just
mm,
want that bit done so that you can start piecing it together. Like obviously for me, I'd rather be on set. Otherwise, I don't really have a job most of the time. But it's kind of mostly what I do.
but
But
do you like the prep bit? If you've got a role that engages you, do you like that bit where you're kind of able to look at it and go, actually, who's this character going to be like? How do
Yeah.
how do they sound in, do you like that bit as much as,
I love
actually
that because
and action bit?
I do. And I think because, and also for me, costumes are made a thing because I've got like,
Yeah, yeah.
I did a BND in fashion and I was doing an HND and I got kind of right to the end and I realized I'd been off and I was working at the same time doing two things and I just ended up leaving. So, but I did 4 years at fashion college.
Right.
For
Wow.
me, like getting that character, like a lot of the time I'd be like, so I'll start actually with what do they wear? What's their like, what's their wardrobe? And then I feel like once I get into their clothes, I feel like I'm already halfway there. And then it's obviously working on all of those other bits, their backstories and,
Yeah.
their likes, their dislikes, all of those, their relationships, everything. But yeah, I do really love that bit. And I always look forward to like, once I've got all of that preparation done, I always then look forward to kind of getting on set and like jumping into their shoes.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I don't know, but I can see what you're saying. And I think because you have so many ideas as well, like once you're doing one, you're like, what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
But
I've absolutely had to ration myself this year. I've gone into this year with a very strict agenda of, there's like three creative projects, and I'm like, these are getting finished and these are getting done, and I'm not going to start something else or get distracted. If something else, if one of the other things that I've worked on, if it gets sold to a third party or it gets whatever,
mm,
then that's kind of out of my hands, and it's like, yep, that's fine. But in
mm,
terms of my own creative drive, I'm like, no, it's this and this, and that's what 2025 is all
yeah,
about. And I've had to be mean to myself, because otherwise I'll end up with 25 half, a quarter finished projects, come the end of the year, and that's no good to anybody.
that's true. And then Bordello Death Tales. So I'm pretty sure I did a little tape audition for this one.
Oh,
I,
did you?
I feel like I
Was it
did.
my chapter?
I don't know, maybe not your chapter, but there was somebody who needed a burlesque dance, and I remember this was when I was must have been very early on in my when I might even still
Mm.
at drama school, and I'm sure I did like a little burlesque dance. I think it's before I'd even done any burlesque training, so I can see why they wouldn't have given it to me.
That might have been Jim's chapter. Jim's
Yeah,
chapter starts
it
with a
it was.
dance, so.
It wasn't your bit. Yeah, it was that one. But
But it was yeah. I was, again, it was before anthologies kind of became a thing, and it wasn't something where we'd all shot a short and then we kind of put them together as an afterthought. It
mhm.
was all very carefully planned out, so that we had a framing story where all three directors were on set for the framing story, and we kind of, so we were able to have characters who came into one story and went out and went into another story.
I love that. I love a
um
really well put together anthology, like Trick or Treat. You know,
oh, it's
I love how
wonderful.
it all just completely entwines and it's just done perfectly.
Yeah, and the atmosphere on Trick or Treat is just,
Mm.
it's such a perfect sort of Halloweeny. Oh, it's
Mhm.
just wondrous. But yeah, so we were proud of that. And then the follow up, which was, we shot as Battlefield Death Tales, but it got released in this country as Nazi Zombie Death Tales. Got released in America as Angry Nazi Zombies. Got released in Germany as Nazi Zombie Battleground. It never came out in two territories with the same title. And that one, I guess my story didn't land as much. Certainly, looking at the reviews, mine was not the most loved chapter in that one. But weirdly enough, it was probably the most personal thing I've ever done, because I thought it, because we were offered to do a sequel as long as it was set in World War II,
Mm.
and I kind of had not exactly moral worries about it, but I wanted to make sure I was dealing with it in a way that didn't look like war is cool, because I
Mm.
kind of don't think it is.
Yeah.
And to get it as a brief, you kind of go, all right, well, how can I kind of deal with that, I guess. And so I did do something that was a bit more low key and a bit more personal. It still had chainsaws and devil spiders and stuff like that in it, but by my standards, it was relatively restrained. But yeah, they're all good stuff.
So in between those on IMDb, there is another film that you
Oh
may or
yes.
may not want to talk about. You might just go, what next?
What film's that, Danny?
Strippers versus werewolves.
I haven't heard of that one.
You haven't heard of that
It
one.
must have
It
been one
looks
of those ones
exciting.
that never happened. That's what I tell my therapist. It was just one of those ones that never happened.
Yes. Well, we can gloss over that one if you like. I mean, I did read the original script and I really liked the original script.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, I had the best intention. I think there were an awful lot of wonderful creative people who did have the best intentions with that
yeah.
movie. And it ended up being the one that everyone goes, oh, not
But
through.
it does have a very catchy title, so I can imagine, like, when people are scrolling on the Netflix or whatever, it is one people will click on because of the title.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was a punchline for years. I mean, that's kind of how it came about. I'd the initial name actually came up because I used to record everything on was it like Film 4 and Sky Movies and stuff like that. Back in the days of VHS, back pre-DVD,
Mm.
if they would show movies, like a series of low budget movies or horror movies or trashy or obscure movies, and they'd show them all night. And I'd just put on a long play tape and I'd just leave it recording. And one night I'd left it on, I think it was probably Sky Movies. And there were a bunch of movies, or at least two, maybe three, that were back to back, that were all these kind of, set in the kind of nightlife strip bars and stuff. But they're all serial killer ones. And I'm trying to think what the names of them were now. And I literally scribbled strippers versus maniacs on the tape because it was one that I just left recording with all these movies on it. And so strippers versus maniacs became like a kind of ongoing running joke between particularly me and my wife. I used to do stand up years ago, and I used to occasionally mention that. And somewhere along the line, it morphed into strippers versus werewolves, and so I'd used it as a kind of punchline in terms of if we ever run out, if the company's ever really in terrible trouble, if it's whatever, we'll shoot strippers versus werewolves because it was such a punchy kind of title. Um, and then it ended up being that I used it. We were a page short on a brochure for Cannes. We went out to Cannes one year trying to shift rights for movies that we still had some rights for. And we put together this little brochure, and because the number of pages had to be divisible by 4 or whatever it was,
Right.
we ended up with 1 page short, and so I just put strippers versus werewolves. It's a B movie, but it's a bloody good one.
Hmm.
As like this coming soon kind of thing in it.
Hmm.
And then through doing that, which was again more or less a joke, but then it ended up kind of I'd get approached about it and stuff like so. It ended up existing, which is sort of nuts.
The one that wasn't meant to be, but
Yes, yeah, exactly.
and then
But
House on Witch Pit.
yeah, House on the Witch Pit's coming up. It's coming up to the 10th anniversary of us destroying it on stage. So we shot the movie, we premiered it, and I destroyed the master copy and the backup on stage after its one and only screening. And so that would be 10 years ago next January. We did that. We then cut together a completely different version because obviously we destroyed the finished movie, and we did. I mean, that wasn't just a bit. It no longer
Was that the
exists.
whole plan? Is that what this is all about? It was a film that you just wanted to.
Yeah, I again, I think it was one of those things about the idea of infinite content, which still bothers me. I
Hmm.
really like the idea of people going, "Oh, I'd like to watch that," and you're going, "Oh, you can't. You just can't." It almost ended up being this thing where I thought the idea of a film that you destroyed. It sounds really, for a dude who wrote Strippers versus Wells, it does sound like, oh, it's a big artistic pretension or something. But I like the idea of in a world where you can watch any movie and just click the button, click the button,
Hmm.
click the button. There it is. It's £3. Click the button. I don't like it. Click the button. And they go, oh, what's House on the Witch? Oh, you can't watch that one. What? And it was always like an idea of a
Yeah.
film being, and because it was about the movie was about a lost movie as well, a lost movie that was never released, which is also called House on the Witch Pit. So
Hmm.
the film within a film is called House on the Witch Pit. And so then that meant that some of the press or some of the narrative stuff that we'd put out about the plot of the movie gets muddled up with the fact that the movie itself got, yeah. So it was my big artistic expression, I guess. But I am quite tempted with the idea that for the 10th anniversary, because there was a second edit, we put together a
Yeah.
completely different version of it, which we released on Amazon for just one night on Halloween. Can't even remember what year it was, but it was available on Halloween for one night, and
Oh,
then we
cool.
deleted that as well. That one's also gone. But I might just go back one time and do a final thing, and just so that for all the people that work really hard on it as well, because
Yeah.
obviously you have people that worked on it and did brilliant work on it. And so to say to them, aha, well, I've destroyed it as a kind of artistic statement seems a little bit unfair. And they've
I feel
waited
like
10
you're
years.
like the original Banksy of film.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
That's me.
he
It's just
copied
me
you
and
when he,
Banksy.
yeah, when he blew. What did he do? He had that piece of art and somebody paid for it, and then it like, did he? It
Yes,
destroyed it. I
it
don't know.
self-combusted, didn't it? Yeah, I forgot
Self-combust.
about
That's
that.
what it did. Yeah, yeah.
And oh, the KLF burning £1 million. I mean, I've always liked those kind of, statements, I guess.
Don't
But
know
yeah, I don't
about
want
that
to be
one.
too pretentious about
Don't know about that one. The things, I think the films we could make with £1 million.
it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, the KLF did. They made a novelty single, and it got to number 1, and they made £1 million out of it. And they were like, "Well, we never. This was not." And so they just took it to an island and burnt it. And there is a film of them sitting burning it note by note, the million
Oh,
quid. It's quite a remarkable thing.
God. That's mental. That is mental. And then we are up to another versus film.
Yes.
Powertool Cheerleaders versus the boy band of the Screeching Dead. And I think that's probably the first time I've got the title right. So I do have it in front of me. And then I
It's
quickly looked and then I,
That was perfect. Every
thank
word,
you.
every syllable, you got the whole thing.
You know what it is? It's always been screeching and screaming and dead and
Yep.
death. And I've mixed those two up. So it's usually I'm either saying screeching dead or no, that's right, screaming dead or screeching death. And it's those two words I've always kind of muddled, but
You're
screeching.
not alone, funnily enough, because there are other movies that use the term hang on, screaming dead, I think.
Yeah.
And so people do sometimes muddle it up. Sometimes I'll appear place or it'll be in the blurb, and I've stopped correcting it. It just kind of go as long as it's a whole bunch of words with Powertool Cheerleaders at the beginning. That works for me.
Yeah.
Again, that was one of those movies that kind of came to fruition because of the crazy title, I guess. In that it was on my pile of scripts where I'd been working on a little bit. As I say, I'm a sucker for working a little bit on something and then working a little bit on something else. And then I gave up on it pretty much. I thought out of all the stuff, out of the 5 or whatever I was working on at the time, I thought, I'm going to leave this one. And so I tweeted, I'm going to abandon work on Powertool Cheerleaders versus the Boy Band and the Screeching Dead. And the wonderful Charlie Bond, our producer and star, and who just worked herself stupid to bring the thing, drag it kicking and streaming into existence. From that initial tweet, just went, no, 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 we need to make that one. And that was it. Kind of went from there. I think. I think she messaged you that day
I
in
think I
terms
saw
of
the tweet. I think I saw your tweet, her tweet, and then I was like, I think I commented on it too, and I was like, yes, it definitely needs to happen. And then, yeah,
so yeah, and it took a really long time, and then obviously we had so the Kickstarter went really well. But so for a long time there was myself, Phil Sheldon, who worked on the music, because I would do these sort of acoustic things and then I give them to Phil and Phil would turn them into full band incredible music. There was James Hayman Morton and Charlie, and so for quite a while it was kind of the 4 of us creating stuff behind the scenes, and then we launched a Kickstarter and worked very hard to kind of publicize that, and then that did really well. At one
yeah,
point
that
we
was
were number 1
incredible.
in the world, number 1 Kickstarter film project in the world, not Kickstarter of anything. So yeah, so that went kind of nuts. And then we also we were doing stuff, we were dealing with COVID regulations where things would ease up and then things would lock down, and so we were having to sort of abide by all of those while we were trying to get this movie made, and yeah, so it ended up being a very long haul,
I think
but
that there was
I'm
a
really
lot of
proud of it.
cast, wasn't there? So a lot of the time you had the group like with all the cheerleaders, and then maybe I would be there and the boy band or whatever. And it was like
Mm,
when you've planned everyone's schedule, it's difficult to get that many people in a room at the same time when everybody's got other commitments. And then COVID hits and the whole schedule's out of the window. And then you've got to try and pull everyone back in. And of course, as soon as the restrictions are lifted, everyone else is trying to like book them
yeah.
and reschedule them at the same time. So I think it did get really tough, but you managed.
We did, and as I say, I'm really proud of it. And that one premiered at Fright Fest, and so that was lovely. And it was, as I'm sure you remember, I'm not.
I was there.
Yeah, absolutely. I was sort of thinking, I'm kind of telling the audience this. It
Yes,
premiered at Fright Fest. I'm not actually
good.
informing Danny of that. She knows. So yeah, it was great fun though, wasn't it?
It was so fun. It's such a fun film. I mean, all of the, I mean, a music, like everyone loves a musical, don't they? Well, not everyone
Mm,
does, but I
well,
do. And
I
there's
do
not
too.
that many horror musicals.
No.
And I think ever since Buffy did Once More with Feeling, I was like, I want to be in a musical. I mean, obviously, I love The Wizard of Oz and I love Grease, but I've never really had that kind of voice for like, one of those kinds of musicals. But yeah, I love the idea of being in a musical, even if, I just got one song or something, which is
Yeah.
what happened, but it was super fun. But we're actually running out of time for our first half. So we're going to
Oh,
come
okay.
back in the second half and talk more power tools and about Pat's other things.
Fantastic.
Welcome back to the Scream Princess podcast. Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the second part of the Scream Princess podcast with me, Danny, and the lovely Pat Higgins.
Hello.
Hello. So we had our little 10-minute break thanks to the new Zoom rules, which is a new thing. But yeah, and if you try and do it, it's like you have 6 minutes to wait. You have 5 minutes to wait. So I've made myself a cup of tea because it's quite cold. It's a cold day today.
It really is. I went out for a walk and I seem to have just it still feels like it's in my bones, you know. I sort of came back just going, yeah, it's really cold.
Yeah, it's like we had a few warm days last week, and now it's like it's hit us again. We're through another cold snap. It is still February though, as we record
Yeah.
this, and this is England. So if anyone's listening to this or watching this from anywhere else in the world, just in case they're wondering where we're at, um, yeah, it is cold. It's cold in February. It's good horror weather though. Do you find when you're writing, do you find that like the weather kind of affects your mood? So different weather, or do you find like you like to write at nighttime if you're doing horror or anything? Because I find like a cold, rainy day or like late at night is if I'm writing horror, I that's like kind of my time or my atmosphere.
Yeah, well, I like to I tend to break scripts up into about 40 beats early on, or 40 little bits of business. And then I tend to write them out of sequence. And so if I'm in a foul mood, I might write something really bleak or really whatever. And so I'll go, oh, okay, that will be scene 7 or scene whatever.
Right.
If it is, as you say, sort of cold and chilly and whatever, then I might pick out some scenes that will match that mood. And then I kind of, arrange them all and in the I work it all out in the rewrite to make it sort of tonally consistent. But yeah, I think writing what feels right is really important, and the weather and everything can be a part of that.
Yeah, I like the atmosphere to help me set the scene,
Yeah,
put me in the mood. Like if I'm writing something more funny, it might be more in the daytime and I've probably got a glass of wine on the go and I don't know. And do you feel like there's a part in your characters when you're writing? Do you feel like there's a part of you in each of them?
oh
Like
god, yeah,
you
all,
have to
all
kind
of
of
them
get
are
in their
just
head,
different
don't
bits of
you?
me.
Yeah, I always feel like that too. I'm like, oh, I know how to be that person and that person and that person.
Yeah, and I think if I didn't feel that, I don't know how I could connect them. I mean, I try very hard to make sure they don't all have my voice, my vocabulary, all of that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But there's something at the heart of each of them, even the horrible ones, where there's some kind of, it's come through some kind of exaggeration of some part of me, I guess. So yeah, I need to, because baddies don't think they're baddies. If you write a baddie who thinks they're a baddie, it's like no one wants to be that. And small characters, like if a character only has one line or something, they're not small characters in their own world. They're the hero in their own world. They're the all the protagonist and whatever, all these people breezing through, they're just the side characters in the world of of the character who might be a kind of background artist or something like that. So I try and be mindful of that, and I try and make sure that my characters always you know are people, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So what were your like early like horror influences? Like, can you remember the first horror film you ever watched?
Yeah, because I was scared of everything. When I was a little kid, I was the kid where if you'd go around someone's house and they were watching Scooby Doo, I'd go no, and I would nope out, and I would sit in the kitchen and eat cake with their parents rather than sit and watch Scooby Doo with the other kids. I
No.
was scared of absolutely everything. I phoned up. I went on a live radio phone in complaining about the poster for Scanners when I was 7 because I was scared of it. And it was just like, how can you have this horrible poster? Because for that, it was the lack of context completely threw me. It's like 5 seconds, the pain begins, 10 seconds, you can't breathe, 15 seconds, you explode, or whichever way it goes. And I was like, what causes that? I needed to know more rather than less. I was just like, you can't just drop that on a kid and go, oh yeah, in 20 seconds you'll explode, and then not give them any kind of context for it whatsoever. So all that stuff
How about, how
really,
did your like parents, like, did you say to your parents, I need to phone the radio station? They were like,
yeah.
okay. But like,
Yeah, I'm hugely grateful to my mum that kind of it was particularly mum that anything like that. If I said I want to phone up the radio station, she'd go for it. I was the youngest caller they'd ever had on, and I don't think they were expecting me to rant about the poster for Scanners in the way I did. But in the same way, like I would write sort of 4 pages of whatever nonsense an 8-year-old writes. And I go, but how can I turn that into a book? And mum will go, well, send it to some publishers or send it to agents or send it. So I was sending stuff out to publishers and agents when I was like 8. I was sending out little typed sheets with Tipex on them. And, I owe my mum such a huge debt for that because it meant by getting that out of the way early that in my head it was like I can send any old crap off and that's not a big thing, and it only needs to work kind of once. So yeah, she managed to demystify all of that. And my uncle was Tim Stout, and he was a horror writer, and so that also meant that for me I could look at the world immediately around me and see it's achievable. I know I could walk into a bookshop in my hometown and see my uncle's book on the shelves, which then, in that thing where you're kind of joining the dots in your head, you're kind of going, oh, okay, it is possible for someone in my family to
yeah.
write a book and whatever. And so therefore, I'm very grateful to all of my family for their kind of support and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so I was so convinced that horror would freak me out that I didn't watch any horror. I loved movies. I loved sci-fi, but I didn't watch any horror until I was 14. I saw Alien,
Right.
and my brother Colin had wanted to see it, and he saw it first. And he said, "I think you'll be all right." And he warned me a couple of bits that I might wobble on, but he's like, "I think you'll really enjoy it." And I'm very grateful to Colin as well for that advice because he was spot on. And actually watching Alien, I was then like, oh, this isn't as scary as all the stuff in my head. This isn't as scary as I thought a horror movie would be. And so from that point, I was just like, and now I want to watch everything. So, so by the time I got to kind of 16, I was trying to track down the movies that at that time you couldn't get in this country. So things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Exorcist and things like that,
Video
that at that
nasty.
time you couldn't get. Sorry?
The video nasties.
Yeah, or at least the reputable video, the higher end ones.
Yes.
Yeah, and so that was the sort of thing where I was like, now I'm seeing all the mainstream ones. And I want to find all these sort of historic ones. And there was a girl called Leanne at my college that I went to when I was about 16. And one day she just turned up with like a 20th generation pirate copy of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it was like, so I'm grateful to her. I haven't spoken to her in how long, but it was that thing where it's people around you who make
Yeah.
it possible for you to discover who you are and how you're going to do stuff, I guess.
So how do you feel about Scooby-Doo now? Can you watch it?
No, I'm still terrified. Yeah, no, I've got a lot of love for
I
Scoob.
kind
I've
of
got a
feel
lot of
sad
love
that
for
you missed it
Scrappy.
as a kid though, because that is like my like growing up like with my favorite, well, Scooby-Doo, Count Duckula, all the kind of little creepy horror-esque
I
kid
I
shows.
think I think I adapted to Captain Caveman and the New Shmoo before I got used to Scooby Doo. Eventually, Scooby Doo was my Texas Chainsaw Massacre of.
Yeah. I don't
But
think
yeah,
I think
eventually
the
I
only
settled
person
in.
who scared me was the Sad Sack and the Raggy Dolls. I thought
Oh,
he was sinister. And I even thought then he just looked a bit sinister. I'm sure he was lovely. I was judging him by his appearance, and that's wrong.
the, I mean, I think that I don't know if you've read either of the Scarred for Life books, which are just wonderful about children's culture in the 70s and 80s. So the first one's just about 70s stuff, the second one's just about 80s stuff. And they're fantastic books. And
I feel
as
like I
you
will now. I'm
Oh
intrigued.
yeah, I really cannot recommend them highly enough. They're amazing, and they've got a podcast as well. The guys that write the thing have got a
Right.
podcast, and it's that thing where it delves through so many things of like TV from my childhood where I've completely forgotten it. And you'll turn a page and it will hit something almost primal in you where you're suddenly staring into the face of, what was it? Wurzel Gummidge had a mad head or something like that. He had a head that was and it's sort of covered in mud and it's so sinister. And Scarred for
I
Life
loved Wurzel
reintroduced me to
Gummidge.
it. You liked it?
I loved it. I can't really remember it now, but I know when I was a kid, I loved it. And I had a Wurzel Gummidge annual, and I loved it. I didn't so
Well,
much like the new ones. Did you watch those? He
I
looked a bit
saw, I
more,
think
he
maybe
looked a
one
bit
episode.
more like a kind of turnip crossed with like, in Pirates of the Caribbean, is it Davy Jones?
Yeah, yeah.
It looked like a turnip crossed with him. It didn't look like Wurzel Gummidge. It wasn't Wurzel Gummidge I know.
Not my Wurzel.
It's that on my tea. No, he's not my Wurzel. So those are your like kind of early forays. And who are your like influences? So who are your like favorite horror films? Or like once you overcame your fear of Scooby-Doo and you
Yeah.
could watch,
Uh,
when Alien saved the day, you were
Alien
saved by an alien.
Alien did save the day. And in fact, prior to Alien, actually, to give it in fairness, Gremlins came out of the cinema when I was 10. And I was absolutely obsessed with it, but it was given a 15, so I wasn't able to go and see it. So I had all of the toys, all of the books, I had the adult novelization, the kids novelization, every bubblegum card, every whatever, every toy. I was absolutely obsessed with Gremlins. I used to sit and count off the days until I estimated it was going to be available on video.
Oh my
So I
God.
had to wait from December 84 when it came out at the cinema to the very end of October 85 it came out. Sorry, it came out at the cinema December 84, came out on video the very end of October 85. And
Mm.
so I'd had this long obsessional wait for that. And I think that changed me in some ways. Gremlins is the movie I've seen more than any other. I've seen Gremlins over 100 times. And so that one will always be, that's always the movie that's the closest sort of touchstone for me. But there's also a bunch of other ones. Night of the Creeps, Fred Decker's Night of the Creeps, is one of those movies that I saw something in that fundamentally rewired my brain a bit. I think I would be a liar if I suggested you could watch Night of the Creeps and not go, oh, I think Pat was influenced by this. um, Things like Little Shop of Horrors, actually,
Mhm.
particularly the musical side of things. I guess Little Shop of Horrors was the first musical that I loved.
Yeah.
Um, and Yeah, and I mean, in terms of sort of straight horror rather than the horror comedy and rather than whatever, it's The Shining would be the one that I go back to in terms of the one where the scares land best for me. And I've got a huge amount of love for The Exorcist 3 as well. I always bang on about the fact that The Exorcist 3 has an insane amount of jokes in it and no one ever notices. Everybody remembers the jump scares because it's got some cracking jump scares for the ages in it, but no one really seems to remember that Exorcist 3 has loads and loads of gags in
I
it. It's a
haven't seen
really
it.
funny film.
I
It's
haven't
wonderful.
seen
Really
it.
recommend
Another
it.
one to go on my list. There's always films I haven't. There's more that I haven't seen that I should have seen than I have, and I've seen like obscure stuff that no one else has probably. Like, what did you like yesterday? I was sat doing work on my laptop, and there's a film, and it's so not horror, but I always feel re-inspired when I watch it. Legally Blonde, just in the
Yeah, yeah.
background, because I feel like she achieved, and I was trying to have an achievement day yesterday of getting stuff done, so that's what went on.
The thing I always think about Legally Blonde is Blake Snyder's screenwriting book Save the Cat, which some screenwriters love and some screenwriters hate. It seems to be a very, very Marmite book and it seems to get very strong reactions. But I love the fact that he keeps referring back to Legally Blonde over and over again. It's like his go-to example in that book because it's so perfectly structured.
Mm.
And so it's a great movie. But I love the fact that, one of the most referenced screenwriting books of the last quarter of a century is constantly uses Legally Blonde as the structure template because
I
it just
have the
works
book
so
and I
well.
haven't read it, so maybe
Oh,
I
it's worth
can.
it.
It's literally on the bookshelf just behind you. I definitely should watch it. And you teach film. So
I do.
were you making films before you became a teacher, or were you always kind of side by side?
No, I started lecturing 2009, very beginning of 2009,
Right.
and I really got the my first position lecturing because of industry experience. So I hadn't gone and got a teaching qualification, I hadn't whatever, but I had made movies that you could walk into the shops and buy. And at that time, that was seen as, oh my God, it has something to teach, I
Mhm.
guess. So for the last, where are we now? So for the last 16 years, I've kind of ping-ponged a bit where sometimes I will concentrate more on the lecturing side of my career, sometimes I concentrate more on the industry side of my career. Sometimes I've dropped right back down to sort of just a day or two, of doing any lecturing if I've got a lot of industry stuff on.
Mhm.
But it's worked quite well because particularly um, you, particularly with other projects, where, as I say, sometimes I do script doctor stuff, I'll do rewrites, I've done some billboard work and things like that. And you never know when you're going to get those gigs.
Yeah.
And as you get older, and particularly, if you start to have a family, you start to have, it's like, well, when I was in my early 20s, if I had a crap month in terms of money, I could just eat beans and not go to the pub, and that would be all right. But if there's other people kind of depending on you, that's like, that doesn't really wash. And so having the twin career where I kind of knew that the academic side would hopefully be regular and always be there means that I'm able to be more flexible and take more chances with the screenwriting and directing side of things, because I never have to solely lean on it.
Yeah.
And it means that I still get to spend all the rest of my time talking about the subject I love with people who are similarly engaged with it. So I'm very lucky to work with the students that I work with, and get to talk movies all day, every day.
Have you had any students that like have finished and graduated and are now like have made their own horror films that we might have seen or
Not. I've had some that have gone on to quite significant places in big companies. I've had students who've gone on to significant places at the BBC, at Frame Store as well, in terms of visual effects. And I've had some that have done particularly independent shorts and stuff that have got a lot of festival play. I don't know. Maybe I put them off horror, because thinking about it, I've had a few students that have gone and done horror shorts, but we
right?
haven't yet had a
Not a
feature from
horror
one of
feature
my
film
ex
yet.
students. I'm
Yes,
sure it'll happen.
not yet. And your kids are into horror now.
Yes, yeah. Again, when you spend all of kids when they're born, you kind of spend all your time keeping them away from it, and then they hit a point where they go, "Why is there a monster in the garage? Why is there a severed foot on that shelf? Why, all of those sorts of things." And so they end up growing up around bits of things that have come back from set, and
Props
posters
and
and stuff like that. So I think
memorabilia.
there's a level of interest there, and then you just have to sort of sit tight for a decade and a half until they're old enough to actually watch anything.
It's not a real severed foot.
Exactly. No, it's not. I should clarify. That's what I tell everybody in a way is.
Yeah. Not the one on the shelf anyway.
No, no, absolutely.
And obviously through your lecturing, you end up at various film festivals and doing different talks. And every year at Horror on Sea, you do Pat Higgins masterclass. And I've been to a few of them and they're all different. So every year they kind of focus on a different thing. So can you tell me a bit about those?
Yeah, I started doing those actually pre Horror on Sea, the Southend Film Festival, which Paul Cockgrove, who runs Horror on Sea, just incredible. How he's just this incredible cultural force in the area, and to have started up first the Southend Film Festival and then the Horror on Sea Festival. But when the Southend Film Festival started, I did sort of how to make a movie classes for that for a couple of years. And then when Horror on Sea started up, it was a natural fit that they kind of migrated. They got more of
Mm.
a horror theme to them, and they kind of came over. Um, I might change it up a bit next year. I've been kind of toying with the idea of that, because actually Horror on Sea I think has changed quite a lot over the 12, 13 years that it's been running,
Mm.
where I think initially you had an audience where a lot of them were people who just liked watching horror movies. And I think
Mm.
now you have much more of an audience where they are involved in making horror movies in different ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's features, sometimes it's they're there to support other people who make them. And so I don't know whether the idea of a masterclass really has any mileage anymore, because it's more like so much of the audience are peers. They're other people who are making movies,
Yeah.
rather than being people who watch movies and go, oh, how do you make that? So I might change it up a bit next year, but I do like just having an excuse to get on stage and talk to the wonderful people at Horror on Sea for for an hour every year. So I don't want to give up the slot, but I maybe just to recognize the fact that the audience has changed so much and they're so creatively driven, and that most of the people there, don't need me to tell them how to do stuff because they're already doing it.
Well, I don't know because I still find that they're really interesting. Like even if it's somebody who does do something, a lot of people will only not everybody does a bit of everything in film. So,
Mm.
we all master classes, each one's different. So somebody will learn something that they don't know, even if they're in the film industry. It's still interesting to learn kind of other sides. And I know I came to one and it was the how to write a movie in 30 days.
Yeah.
So it was getting literally from having no idea to having a first draft on paper in 30 days. So it's not like, if you don't write every day, it's not necessarily going to be 30 days, but
Mm.
over 30 days of doing the work,
Yeah.
basically. And I went away from that and I actually planned in the way, like all of my little notes, and I actually had a notepad and I had post-its and I planned all my scenes. And it's the only film that I've planned out properly ever to write the script. And then I kind of didn't do anything with it. It took me a lot longer than 30 days. But probably the amount of work I put in it was the 30 days. Um, but I ended up way short on pages, which I still am. So it's still a work in progress, but it's a first draft is done. So I did find
Yeah.
that really helpful. And it is probably better structured than, all of my other stuff.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm glad it was of some use. And yeah, I mean, I think sometimes if they do come up short, I try and look at that as a bit of a gift because sometimes I've had ones where it doesn't feel like
Mm.
when you it ends 3 minutes or roughly. And I think sometimes there are lots of opportunities in that. So I hope it comes together in a way that you're happy with it.
Yeah, hopefully. It's like I said, it's still a work in progress. And it's a bit more ambitious actually than some of the other films that I've made. So it's one that I'm going to need to get more budget for and put a bit more, you know, I don't know, a bit more money behind it. So I'm still
Yeah.
looking at how I'm going to do that, but I'm excited about it.
Oh, fantastic! I did the weirdest one I ever had from the write a movie in 30 days because I kind of toured that a bit. I played a load of different festivals with that one. A lot of my kind of talks I just do at Horror on Sea, but sometimes I'll do one and I'll take it off to some other places. So I took that off around and about, and I did a bunch of shows for it, for London Screenwriters Festival and Birmingham Film Festival and all these sorts of things. And then someone came up to me, messaged me. I think they messaged me on social media actually, and sort of said, "Oh, I really, really enjoyed write a movie in 30 days." And this was in like April or May, and they said, "I saw it in October." And it was brilliant, and I absolutely swore by it. And I sort of said, "Have you managed to write a script?" And they said, "Well, I just said I saw it in October, so I've written six."
Oh,
And
wow.
it was like write a movie every 30 days. They take, and it was like, wow. I mean,
That's amazing.
I was really pleased.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. I'd like to have the time to sit every 30 days and
Yeah,
make movies amongst everything else that you have to do.
yeah,
How do you schedule your
absolutely.
time and make sure you get like your stuff done?
Yeah, I think uh, I think the biggest enemy that any writer ever faces is the idea that they're going to have some perfect space, and that's when they'll be able to write that. I mean, Strippers versus Werewolves that we mentioned earlier, although I may have dismissed it existed. But Strippers versus Werewolves, I wrote. At that time, I was lecturing in Grays. And so I had a commute every morning, which was on a train, and I was stood up. It was standing room only on the train, and I wrote that movie on my iPhone while commuting,
Yeah.
because I knew if I didn't, I wouldn't write it. I needed, I needed to get something done every day. Where's my window? Oh, it's there. But I'm stood up with someone, jostling into me and whatever. Was it ideal? No, but it was the space where I got the movie done. And I think being able to realistically identify what your best shot is. Actually, Powertool, at that point, I was guest lecturing in Chelmsford, and I used to turn up like half an hour before I needed to, and I'd walk off to, there was a park right near where I was lecturing, and
Mm.
I used to walk around and just dictate 10 minutes off my head every single morning and then run that MP3 or whatever it was through transcription software. But so again, it was like I need to get the script done, and at the moment the only thing I can do is turn up a bit early
Yeah.
to where I'm lecturing and crowbar it in there. So, you know, that was where I got that bit done. So I'm very rarely sitting all snugly and warmly with, you know, a cup of coffee and a candle or whatever. It's normally on a commuter train or standing in a rainy park or whatever. But I get it done somehow.
I think on a commute is always good. Like I've managed to write film scripts when I've been like stuck in an airport. And it's
Mm.
like, well, I've got my laptop. So in an airport and on a plane where you don't necessarily have internet access. So you can't be on your phone flicking through social media and doing all the other things that you do on your phone. You're like, well, I literally have nothing else that I can be doing right now. And like I said, on a train, you won't be able to flick through your phone because of the signal. So you're able to use your phone for a good
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. It gives you a
Productivity.
focus.
Mm. Well, thank you for coming on. It's been super fun chatting to you. I always feel really inspired when I've spoken to you, and it makes me feel like I want to go off and do work.
That's very, very kind.
Every time I talk
It's
to you, I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm inspired. I should go and have another look at that script, and I should go and
oh,
do this.
definitely, definitely do. What's it called, or do you not want to say that on the podcast?
Well, the working title's Blood and Glitter.
Nice. I like
So
that.
it is a vampire one, but
Nice.
it's got all sorts in it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that sounds wonderful. So, yeah, I'm invested now.
So I've got to finish it.
Absolutely. Thanks
Well,
so much
thank
for
you for
having me on.
coming on, and will I see you at Romford?
I don't know. I really hate that where I kind of go, oh, I'll definitely be somewhere, and then I'm not,
Then
and
you're
then
not.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean,
I'd
I'm the
love to.
same, but I'm hoping to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Virus Detected, I believe, is playing there, which I wrote one of the chapters for. So obviously, I very much want to try and make it along. I'll have to see how it goes.
Yes. What's Virus Detected about then? I think I
Virus
missed that
Detected.
off the list. I did miss it off the list.
It's that's an anthology. It played Horror and Sea this year. It's anthology. Jeff Harmer was did and Chris Josty were very responsible for pulling a lot of it
Right.
together. That's got a
Okay.
chapter by Charlie Bond and James Hayman Morton as well. And it's a whole bunch of really talented filmmakers, and it's a movie about an electrical storm, and that has an effect on different appliances. So it's divided up into different stories. So our story is about a smart speaker, like a kind of Alexa type clone.
Right.
Don't sue us, Amazon. It's not an Alexa. But yeah, so we have a sort of smart speaker that starts behaving very erratically and strangely in the storm. But I wrote that one. It was directed by Paul Cousins, who I think is just insanely talented. I'm incredibly grateful to know him. He helps out at a lot of my talks at Horror on Sea,
Yes.
and he's a fantastic director in his own right. He's a brilliant editor as well. So I'm really grateful that I was able to write that one, and he directed it. And I think it's a really scary little number. It's quite good.
Oh, amazing. Well, hopefully I'll catch it there because I didn't watch anything other than video shop it
Uh,
on sea.
well, the video shop. Congratulations on that one. It was rather epic.
Thank you. Well, catch you soon.
Catch you soon. Cheerio.